So the other thing, when you're making decisions in an organisation, a lot of the time you're going to be making a decision in a group setting. And there's lots of research out there to show that overall, on average, groups tend to make better, more considered decisions than individuals. And the idea that two heads are better than one is fairly widespread, and the research backs that up for most cases. In part, it's about getting a more diverse set of perspectives and ideas and ways of thinking, and also that it just tends to be seen as fairer and more democratic if you've used a group to help you make the decision. But superiority of groups is not a given. It brings with it different risks and challenges, and it can be an area where many organisations struggle to make it work. And that social nature of group decision making means you're adding a huge number of additional variables into the mix. So yes, you've got 185 cognitive biases out there. You need to multiply that by, the number of people you've got in your group. So times 6 or 10 or, that sort of thing. So, as things get more things get much more complex when we're looking at interactive kind of type of group decision making. And Peter Drucker back in the 1960s said, first rule of decision making is that you don't make a decision unless there's disagreement. So that idea that challenge and perspective is good, but it's about balancing that so it's constructive disagreement rather than unhealthy conflict that you end up involved. So there's some tips for how you make group decision making more effective. And the first up is about how you frame the decision making process. So cognitive research has shown consistently that how you talk about a decision or a situation and how you frame it can really change how people respond and react to that situation. So as a manager leading a decision-making process, this gives you a real opportunity. So if you frame a decision-making process as a negotiation, then people are going to go into that process with one mindset, and it's more likely they're going to try and get their position supported or go in thinking they need to argue their corner or defend their ideas. If you queue up the group on the idea that it's about cohesion, it's about unity, or it's about making the most accurate decision, then people will go into it with a different mindset, and they're more likely to take time to explore all of the information, surface different opinions, and reach a shared decision rather than just fight their own corner.
And that sort of talks to prospect theory as well, which is how the language that you use as a manager to actually frame it has a critical factor. If you frame it as a threat, i.e. the classic burning platform, what you often get is a lot of resource thrown at it, but it reduces creativity substantially. So, it's really good for managers to actually frame the problem in multiple ways to give the group a chance to look at it from different perspectives, isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. And that's the other thing, is to pay attention to group dynamics and group process when you've got group decision making going on. So first up, have you got the right people in the room? So this is a little bit what we talked about earlier with stakeholders. Make sure you've got the people who need to be involved. It can be a bit tempting to exclude those. You've got a difficult person, but don't miss a really valuable opportunity to hear their perspectives. And if they're going to play any part in rolling out the decision later on, involve them earlier rather than later. So
as a very outspoken manager once said to me, it's better to have them peeing out the tent than in the tent. I think that's probably a metaphor we can all identify with.
Absolutely, yeah. Second up, do people know why they're involved? How often do people get involved in a process or a meeting and they're not really clear why they're there? So just make sure that everybody knows what decision needs to be made, what their contribution to that is. And it sounds really obvious, but unspoken differences in understanding can really send your discussions and process off track before you've even started. The other thing around group dynamics and group process is an important bias to be aware of, and that's something known as the common knowledge effect. So the idea that information that's shared amongst the group will dominate the discussion. So people spend a lot of time telling each other things they all know. So if the information is known by everybody in the room, that will dominate the discussion. We'll spend much more time talking about that than surfacing the information that might just be held by one person. It's, you need to create a forum where people have that time and space to bring forward the knowledge that only they know, and make sure the group really understands that the whole purpose of that is to raise the overall knowledge of the team. Have a leader who's setting up a norm of information sharing, who encourages people to kind of stimulate information exchange and go through the process, and make sure you lay out all the information before the decision gets made.